Good afternoon, guys. On this March 9th, I'm here on the Cima Dome in Mojave National Preserve to explore what is widely considered the finest Joshua Tree forest there is, or it would be considered the greatest were not for the fact that much of it was burned about 5 years ago. Turns out much of this amazing forest was burned by a wildfire in August of 2020, and it killed a lot of the mature Joshua trees and other plants within the forest. Now, it didn't burn the whole forest, and though it will take a long time to recover, even through the burn area, some plant species are already recovering. So let's see what we can find today, and discuss the general ecology of the Mojave Desert. Now, one species that seems to have fared fairly well through this fire is this one here. I believe this is Purshia mexicana, or the Mexican bitterbrush. It is not exactly the chances could be Stansburyana, but one of the ways you can tell it apart is that this one has very glandular leaves and it grows in a more shrubby form like this. And these ones definitely seem to have at least these little white glandular things on the leaves, which is very interesting. But it's growing quite well here amongst all the devastation, so maybe it just didn't burn or it has recovered well from the burn. Its trunk certainly doesn't seem all that burned, so maybe it wasn't actually torched at all. But it's good to see that plant here. Saw Purshia is a member of the family Rosaceae. As I said, you can also find it in parts of the Great Basin, like in the Escalante Desert is where I first observed it. It's in the southern Great Basin for sure, but still within the Great Basin. Of course, though, the dominant species we have here is this Yucca brevifolia, which is important to know about the Joshua trees. Is there's at least two populations, two major populations, a western, or rather I guess southwestern, and a more northeastern one, and we're definitely in the northeastern population. The northeastern ones they definitely look very different from the upper ones because they branch a lot more frequently. These ones are much more branched than ones you'll find in the western part of its range, and they have smaller leaves, and they tend to have thinner stems, though they also do thicken up a lot, but like the main or branching stems like this, quite thin compared to the ones in the west. So should it be recognized as a separate species? Some people say yes, and classify this one not as Yucca brevifolia variety jaegeriana, but as Yucca jaegeriana. The name in the western population just Yucca brevifolia, which if you consider them varieties, that wouldn't be just Yucca brevifolia variety brevifolia to be clear. But it's a lot of debate still. No one's made any determinations yet, or it's not official. You'll find both names in the literature sometimes, so just keep that in mind, but there are definitely two different varieties. As you can see, they've been pretty badly torched here. They don't survive fire very well. Oh, some we'll find later are definitely growing back from the root, like right here actually, if I mentioned that. This is good to see. I noticed all the medium ones actually, these medium height ones seem to be doing the best. They probably stored a ton of energy down at the root and are able to regrow from that, so hopefully they don't get torched again, because it's really good to see this. Now, the last time I was here was about 2.5 years ago, and they were considerably shorter, like just barely coming to ground at that point in time, so that's good. I've seen some of these rosettes almost like 2 feet tall at this point, so they're doing quite well. I know the winter after I was there was very rainy for the entire western United States, so that may have been a really big help to them. But for now, a lot of the trees here that have been burned are just either dead or starting to recover like that. Let's carry on and see what else we can find. I hope I'm holding the camera stably enough, because last time I was here, I did try to make a video about the burn. This was way back in my first year on YouTube, but the problem was that the footage is totally unusable because, for one, it was windy, which it still is windy. This is a very windy place, but it's not a problem now because I have a microphone. But also, the other issue is that I was just shaking the camera too much. It was often tilted like this. It just looked really awful. So it wasn't usable, but look at this. It's a giant Joshua tree that just fell down over the trail after it burned. This one's definitely not going to recover. Must have been hundreds of years old, because these things typically grow quite slowly. You can, if you want to plant them in your yard, make them grow quicker by giving them consistent, but not too much water. Because desert plants, one of the reasons they grow so slowly is because they're not getting consistent water. Water is obviously very intermittent in the deserts, and some years can be very rainy, while some may not get. And I say very rainy as a relative term, but other years are just not rainy at all. Like you may get, sometimes this place may get no rain. I mean, maybe not here, but certainly lower down, like in Death Valley or just the lower valleys in the Mojave Desert. Okay, now here's another plant that is doing pretty well in recovery. Certainly better than the Joshua trees. This is Yucca baccata, known as the blue yucca or the banana yucca. It makes short little stems that often crawl along the ground. But I noticed it was doing really well since the burn. It's growing back nicely. It must store a lot of nutrients in its fruit, and it must have been able to survive or maybe just very adapted to burns. Now this yucca is native to the Mojave and typically more mountainous areas like on here in the Cima Dome, but also in parts of the southwest Colorado Plateau, or actually even just like the central Colorado Plateau. There's a few areas. It has a bit of an odd range. There's also a New Mexico or Sonora Desert subspecies that lives further south. But this one, which is often distinguished by how blue it looks and the fact that it again has really short stems that kind of just crawl along the ground and don't get very tall ever. The main plant you want to differentiate this from is a Yucca shidegra, by the way, which again typically goes lower down but gets much taller. But yeah, it's one of my favorite plants actually. I really love seeing them because these look so cool to me. It's really good to know that they're doing well. Being said, some other plants aren't doing so well, like the chollas. I've not seen any of these regrow yet. This one most likely is Cylindropuntia acanthocarpa. Or actually, it could be acanthocarpa. I think it's acanthocarpa though. It's hard to tell when it's this heavily destroyed, but there's no way this is coming back, and I haven't seen any regrowing, so it's going to be up to the restorationists to try and plant some more. It's another good specimen of it back there. Those seems to be the most abundant Cylindropuntia species you find, at least in this part of the Mojave Desert. There's two others that we might see on this trail. Cylindropuntia acanthocarpa, Silvery Cholla, and Cylindropuntia famosissima, the pencil cholla. Oh, but then here we go again. There's another really nice, actually even taller. This is what I was talking about. I said I saw some taller Joshua tree shoots coming up. There we go. That's really nice. It's probably about 1.5 feet tall. You can never see it has a bit of a woody stem. Like it's not all leaf anymore. So this is well taken care of. The trunk may eventually fall over. This will continue to live on like that, which is wonderful to see. I mean, the first time I tried making this video about 2 years ago, I was in a pretty bad mood because I was expecting to see a lush forest, and I had no idea it was even burned at the time, until I got here, of course. Okay, that's some old Yucca baccata stems, by the way. Most ones definitely aren't recovering, as we can clearly see. But here's another plant I'm actually a little shocked to see here. That does seem to be doing well enough. This is Atriplex canescens, also known as Fourwing Saltbush, and I'm a bit shocked to see it because it normally grows in valley bottoms and throughout the Great Basin and Mojave Desert, because it is much more a plant of like the salt desert scrub, as I talked about before. It really handles the very salty clay soils of the valley bottoms well, so it's interesting to see it up on this dome upland area right here. But you do see it growing in places outside of its normal habitat occasionally. And it's so named because its fruit, you can see here, have a sort of like papery four wings to them. There's a whole big cluster of them here, but that's sort of what it looks like. You maybe see that there's like 4 wings to the fruit there, hopefully. I don't know. It's a lot of focus, but... Oh, this is another good one. Well, my old friend. I think this must be Eriocoma hymenoides, or Indian ricegrass. I'm thinking it certainly looks a lot like it. That's a good native bunch grass. Probably one of the most common grasses you'll find out here, but it's really good nonetheless. I say out here, I mean in the western United States. As the name implies, it was used as food by the first peoples. And it's just a all-around good plant. I think it was originally Acanthocarpa hymenoides or whatever. Now here is another native plant that seems to be doing quite well. This is Thamnosma montana, also known as Turpentine Broom. It is a member of the family Rutaceae, which is the orange family. And most members of that family tend to have some pretty aromatic, sort of resinous, oily kind of plant parts. This plant normally doesn't have leaves, except after heavy rain, so it photosynthesizes primarily from its thorny branches. Well, all those little black things there are flowers that are just about to bloom. So we're unfortunately, I think, going to miss it, but it is good to see nevertheless. Very strange plant. I like all these cool leafless and thorny plants you find around here. Alright, let's carry on. Now, the Mojave Desert is one of the 4 great American deserts. That is, unless you count the Colorado Plateau as separate from the Great Basin ecologically, which I typically do. It would also be considered Wyoming Basin, and the Snake River Plain is separate, which you can see it's quite complicated just how many deserts there are in North America, but nevertheless it is considered one of the 4 great ones. It is south of the Great Basin as in terms of being an ecological desert, but it's part of the Great Basin geologic region because it was formed the same way, whereby the continental crust was stretched thin here, allowing different blocks of land to sort of slide up and down and create these sort of basin and range topography with alternating valleys and mountains. And for the most part, the water here doesn't drain towards the sea, though the Colorado River does cut right through the middle of it along the Arizona and California border. Okay, Teutonia Peak is where I'm heading. Now, ecologically speaking, the Mojave Desert is pretty interesting. It's one of the smallest deserts in North America at 25,000 square miles about. It's mostly located in California with parts in southern Nevada, sort of northwest Arizona, and southeasternmost Utah, like where St. George is. It is, by some metrics, the hottest desert and the driest desert. This is technically true because Death Valley is within the Mojave Desert, and Death Valley, as of course, is the hottest point in North America, as well as the driest. But that being said, on average, the Mojave may not be that much more dry than a Sonora, and certainly not the Colorado Desert, which is a portion of a Sonora Desert, I should say. And the Great Basin is pretty dry too. But it is definitely a very dry and hot place overall. The plants have to be very tough to survive here. But there are nevertheless a few indicator species that are good to look around here. One of them, of course, is the Joshua tree, Yucca brevifolia, or Yucca jaegeriana, as I already said. It's complicated. Either way, the two of them sort of definitely outline the Mojave Desert in terms of their populations, but they're not found throughout the entire desert. They're definitely a much more high elevation aspect of it. You certainly don't find them very low down. And this desert gets quite low, of course, because, as I said, it includes Death Valley. So some other indicator species are the creosote bush, Larrea tridentata, which you won't be seeing on the site because it occupies the very low valleys. Now you can also find it in the Chihuahua Desert, as well as in the Sonoran Desert, but it certainly helps demarcate the Great Basin Desert, which is too cold to support creosote, from the Mojave Desert to its south. There's also Yucca shadegra, the Mojave yucca, which, again, for the most part, only found in the Mojave Desert and certainly lower down the valleys. And there's a few other plants that are really good indicators. Hey, look, we're back in a nice pot of yucca forest. It's glad to see that this part wasn't burned all that much. See some other good plants. This is Coleogyne famosissima, known as Blackbrush. It's quite thorny. It's a member of the rose family that's found in the Colorado Plateau and parts of the Mojave Desert. And it's really cool, and overall I think it's just starting to leaf out. For most of the year you'll see it. It'll be without leaves because it drops them when it gets too hot and it doesn't grow them back until the spring again. That is a species of Ephedra, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I can try and look it up later. And here's a, well, somewhat still alive, Cylindropuntia acanthocarpa. Got some better ones in the background there. They branch typically quite close to the ground and don't really have a single distinguishing stem. They tend to spread out quite a lot, which is something that distinguishes them from some of the other species of Cylindropuntia you find within the Mojave Desert. Really cool plants all around, I think. Now, climatically, the Mojave Desert, one thing to know about it is that it is in the rain shadow of the California coast ranges and the Sierra Nevada. So it's, for the most part, a rain shadow desert. It does get most of its rain in the winter time, as is the case with California, but it is far enough south to get some summer precipitation in the form of, just intense monsoonal storms. Not as much as the Sonoran Desert, but enough to certainly influence what plants grow here and when they can be biologically active. All right, now here's a new, it seems, probably not as new as the wildfire because it didn't burn through here, Yucca brevifolia, or Yucca jaegeriana. And this is Cylindropuntia, acanthocarpa, one of the other Yucca, Cholla species I talked about. I really hope this clip is good. This one typically has a much more central stem, though it does branch pretty close to the ground here. This particular specimen, you can see it's a lot more spiny, so spiny in fact it looks almost silvery, hence its common name, the silvery cholla. And the sort of individual segments, like the the limbs as they're called, are a bit shorter than with acanthocarpa typically. Here's a good unburned patch of Yucca baccata. So this is how it typically grows, and if you look closely you can see it's got stems growing all along the ground that the leaves emerge from, some of which are dead. But the whole plant can live for quite a while, I believe. Now this could either be Juniperus osteosperma or Juniperus californica. We're sort of on the transition zone between the two. Juniperus californica, which is of course a California juniper, typically grows not as tall as Juniperus osteosperma, the Utah juniper, and it grows more kind of branched out like this without a central stem. But sometimes it does. Another distinguishing feature is that it is typically dioecious, while the Utah juniper is monoecious, so California junipers have male and female plants. Very interesting. And this one's also more glandular, I believe, but I'm not really seeing anything here. It's hard for me to tell. But anyways, glad we're able to find a much more intact yucca forest here on the trail. Maybe I don't need to upload the other clip I made at all. There we go, Cylindropuntia acanthocarpa and Cylindropuntia acanthocarpa growing right next to each other. That one's acanthocarpa, that one's acanthocarpa. Maybe I should make a video on how to tell them apart. I can do that pretty quick. Now, everywhere in the deserts in North America, junipers are a telltale sign you're getting higher up in elevation. Were we to get even higher, like on some other mountain range, we'd eventually find pinyon juniper forests, and even higher than that we could possibly find some like real forests founded by ponderosa pine, or maybe some relictual white fir, and even higher up like limber pine and bristlecone pine. But the mountain here only tops out at about 6,000 feet, if that, so we're not going to find much more than this. And man, just look at that, you can really contrast the total devastation on this side of the trail with the lush and thriving forest on this other side. It's crazy to see like this. Now, Joshua trees are very slow to spread, so while they can recover from this fire, it may take a very long time. And one of the reasons for this is because their original fruit disperser, or seed disperser, the shafted ground sloth, was hunted to extinction. In the past, that species roamed all throughout the deserts of North America, but especially in Mojave, where they loved the fruit of Joshua trees and other yucca species. So now it's extinct, yuccas can only really drop their fruit or disperse as far as they can drop their fruit. So it can take a really long time for them to redistribute back to the center of this burn, possibly thousands of years. So there are some restoration projects to try and plant them back in the center of where the burn is, but because it's dependent on federal funding, I'm positive it is. This is Mojave National Preserve after all. The future of these projects are in doubt, so hopefully nothing bad happens to them, because I want to see a thriving forest here again. Now here we have one that's a little interesting. This Joshua tree must have had some of its central stems survive, because that's where it's resprouting from in part. This is growing right from the central stem, and this stem completely survived. It just sort of killed over, but it started growing again, and the new shoots ran to the ground and are now growing alongside of it. So that's good to see as well. I've seen a few trees that are like this, they're pretty badly burnt, but still regrowing from the main body of the plant, so those ones could likely have a much better head start, I think. Right. And there you go, this Thamnosma montana is higher up in elevation, but it's further along in its phrenology. It's already blooming. That's interesting to see. Now that I'm getting higher up onto the peaks, I'm seeing more of these burnt big cacti. This is a Puncha chlorotica, and it clearly does not survive the fire very well. Puncha chlorotica is kind of interesting. It's a species found mainly in the desert mountains of the Mojave and further south. It grows quite tree-like. It's more of a large shrub, but it gets a very tree-like form, up to 2.5 meters tall, or like 8 feet, maybe up to 10 feet sometimes. Yeah, it seems like the higher precipitation, but it's interesting that something so far north gets a sort of like tree-like opuntia form. You get like really tall, like up to 30-foot tall punches in Mexico, but has a much more tropical environment where it never freezes. These ones have to be pretty frost and snow tolerant. So hopefully we see some more going up. I think we will, but I don't know where. See the top of the Cima Dome out there. You can see how vast and broad it is. These mountains stick out from it. I'm not sure if I get taller from a very high point there, but it's possible. Oh, there's some stuff escaped the fire here. Oh, I see a living Opuntia chlorotica. Let's go. Right up there. That one's kind of living. Yeah, as we get higher up, it makes sense that we see some more of these because I said if you like the desert mountains, not too high up, but certainly above the Joshua trees, it would seem. There we go. Also called the pancake cholla, or not, sorry, pancake prickly pear, because it's sort of paddles like big pancakes, I guess. It's a dumb common name, but it makes sense, I suppose. Oh, there's a big one up there. Hold on. Okay, 1 second. Now there we go. That is a nice mature Opuntia chlorotica. See its stem? It's much more tree-like at the base now. That was once just a paddle, but now it's like a proper stem. If it gets any bigger, it's going to lose all its prickles, as it's already starting to. Very glad this wasn't touched by the fire because it's a really cool plant. And for comparison, you guys probably want to see me throw my hand into there. Just get prickled by it, but I'm not going to give you guys that satisfaction. You get a really great view from here too, and you can see sort of where the boundary of the burn was. Much lower down where the forest likely wasn't so healthy. It seems to have been spared, which is sad. But also, I go around here, you can get another view of it. No clue what that plant is, but it looks cool. But up here anyways, as I was saying, you can see the patches that weren't burned. A little triangle I was walking around. Of course, there was a major firefighting effort to put it out, but it took a while to notice. So I got pretty out of hand, but the other side of the road seems to have fared quite well. And down there on the other side, it really burned right through the heart of the Cima Dome, which is a tragedy. So hopefully there can be some good restoration in the future, because it's really a shame if this just goes away. You can see some unburnt forest down all the way there. Well, it's not in the Cima Dome anymore. I don't think it's quite as nice. But it does get quite dark sort of halfway up the mountain at the top of the baccata, so that's interesting. You can get a better view on the other side. You can see there's actually a significant portion that it wasn't too badly burned, but like I said, it's just a huge devastation. It's going to take a long time to recover, but hopefully, as I said before, there should be some efforts going underway, and if they're not canceled, then we might see some good progress in several decades. This plant, by the way, is, I think it's Prunus fasciculatum, which is commonly known as desert almond, mostly found like the Mojave and maybe some northern deserts, maybe parts of the Colorado Plateau, but I don't think the Great Basin much. Not sure if it's edible like almonds are, but there you go. Kind of funny name, because almonds, like the almonds we eat, are actually native to deserts as well. But that one's native to the Old World, of course. It looks a lot like Coleogyne famosissima, but it's just, once it gets a lot bigger, I think it gets longer, sort of prickly, thorny branches. Both are, of course, members of the family Rosaceae, but not very closely related. This is related to other members of the genus Prunus, like as far as the fruits we eat go, cherries, plums, apricots, peaches, and all that good stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time. That's sort of interesting. This Joshua tree, you can see, seems to have these large growth rings where it fell over. It's odd because monocots don't really have growth rings. They don't grow like dicots do. They can't like, I'm using obviously dicot's an outdated term, but they don't grow like them. They can't wind their trunk normally, but some of them do secondarily in this weird process that these guys clearly are capable of.